Starter Pokemon have stayed pretty consistent over Pokemon's 25-year history, in that they've always been comprised of a Grass, Fire, and Water-type Pokemon. It didn't take long, however, for fans to imagine what it might be like if there were starter Pokemon of other types. The prospect seems pretty fascinating, and it's something that I think a lot of fans would be interested in seeing happen for real at some point. So to go along with that, we are going to explore in this video what it might be like if there were a starter Pokemon of every type. I will be showcasing some fan-made designs that, in my opinion, showcase what starter Pokemon of these types could look like. While most of the Pokemon I will be showing in this video weren't actually made as starters, they give off somewhat of a starter vibe that I think will help get the message across of what official starters of these types could be like, and the artists of all of these designs will also be credited in the description, and I highly recommend checking them all out. With that said, let's get right into it. One of the biggest things about starter Pokemon is that together they make up something called a type triangle. This is a format that allows the three starters to be balanced amongst each other so that one isn't stronger or weaker to the other two. This is why Grass, Fire, and Water are always used as the starter types, because they are currently the only trio of types that have a perfect type triangle, meaning that each type is strong against one of its counterparts and resists the other. For the purpose of this video, we will be looking at these hypothetical starters in different type triangles, just to give you a better idea of what this all would be like if it really did happen. But these type triangles we will be using won't exactly be perfect, and Game Freak would probably do some adjusting themselves to the types if they were to implement this idea for real. Anyways, with that said, the first trio of starters we will be looking at will be a trio consisting of a Steel, Fairy, and Fighting type. This trio does work at least from an offensive perspective, meaning that Steel is strong against Fairy, Fairy is strong against Fighting, and Fighting is strong against Steel. So they all have an offensive advantage, so overall it's a decent example of this idea. These types also fit together pretty well in my opinion in terms of being starter types, so I feel like it would be a pretty good candidate if this idea was ever truly explored. With that said, these are what starters of these types might look like as well. The Steel type was done by Steve0126 on DeviantArt, the Fairy type was done by Hollow's Art on Tumblr, and the Fighting type is from the Pokemon Sage fan game. The Fighting type in particular was tricky because many fighting types are humanoid, but for a starter you would definitely want an animal-based Pokemon. But ultimately, I think this little guy makes for a good example, and I think the Steel and Fairy type mons also show what the starter touch, if you will, could do when it comes to creating new Pokemon of these types with this role. The next trio we are going to be looking at is Ice, Flying, and Fighting. Fighting makes a reappearance in order to help with the balancing, and like the previous trio, this is a group that are at least balanced from an offensive perspective. This is also another intriguing group that really shows how cool and refreshing it could be to have starters of new types, and the Ice and Flying type mons I'm showing here as examples, both designed by Dark and Windy, once again show the potential of starters with new types. I really like the Flying type Pokemon in particular, and the Ice type mon would also be a starter based on a puppy, which surprisingly we have never had for a starter Pokemon, since the closest thing we've got is Fennekin, who's a fox and not an actual dog. So this shows that with the introduction of new types into the starter Pokemon stratosphere, it also brings with it the possibility of those Pokemon being based on new and exciting things that we've never seen before for starter Pokemon. Another trio that involves the Fighting type, because fighting just tends to work well with so many other types apparently, is Fighting, Normal, and Ghost. Now this trio is an interesting one because instead of all of them having an advantage offensively, they have an advantage defensively with an immunity. Normal is immune to Ghost, Ghost is immune to Normal, and Fighting is also immune to Ghost. It's not the most perfect type triangle in the world, but I think it does a great job at showing the possibilities of the starter Pokemon concept. It doesn't just have to be balanced in the way it always has been. There are other creative ways, like this one, where the starters can be balanced amongst themselves, but still do something that's new and exciting. This would also offer some very interesting Pokemon designs, as you can see here. The Ghost type was done by Dark and Windy, and the Normal type was done by West Coast Region on Instagram. I think the Normal type in particular is interesting because in order to make a Normal type starter appealing, since it's just Normal type, you'd have to make it look either really cool, unique, or in this case, cute. And I think this design does a good job of showing that that can be done, and these kinds of things could realistically be pulled off, and pulled off well, if Game Freak wanted to make it happen. This next trio is also one of the more unique variety, but I really like the angle that it takes, and I hope you will too. The types consist of Dragon, Ice, and Steel, which, similar to the first trio, I think would be a really good pairing of types for starter Pokemon. Balance-wise though is where it gets tricky, but also unique and refreshing too. Ice is of course strong against Dragon, and Steel is strong against Ice, but Dragon does not have an advantage of its own here, and Steel does not have a weakness either. While admittedly far from perfect, I think having a Dragon-type starter in this scenario would be cool, because while it doesn't have a type advantage like the other two types in this trio do, it is admittedly the strongest type of the three, so choosing it could be seen as a bit of a trade-off, where you might be picking the strongest of the three type-wise, but you're giving up the chance to have a type advantage in exchange. I think doing something like that with the starters would be really cool, and once again, just goes to show the amount of possibilities that this concept has outside of the established formula. Not to mention that a Dragon-type starter would be amazing, and this design by Grey Wind that I'm using to illustrate that idea is a great example of why that is. Next up is a trio that's a little more traditional, and that's because it uses one of the three traditional starter types. Rock, Bug, and Grass is a trio that would probably work a little better in the sense that these are all early-ish game types, so it wouldn't throw off the flow of the games as much as maybe some of the other ones we've talked about. It also is a balanced trio offensively, with Rock being strong to Bug, Bug to Grass, and Grass to Rock, so the structure is there for this trio as well. Finally, the designs could also be fantastic, as these designs by Dark and Windy both show. Admittedly, it does feel a little bit odd to have one of the traditional starter types here, but not the others. However, if something like this was ever done for real, it could be seen as a sort of passing of the torch from the more traditional era to a new age of adventure and creativity within the world of Pokemon, and that would actually be pretty stinkin' cool. Another trio involving the Grass type would be Ground, Poison, and Grass. Just like the Rock, Bug, Grass trio, this group of types is also offensively balanced and deals with more moderate types strength-wise, making it a more solid and realistic candidate. In fact, we have already seen a Poison-type starter Pokemon if you can believe it, and that would be Poipole, although it's said to be a starter Pokemon in its own world and not ours. If we were to have more earthly Pokemon take this mantle though, I think they could still be great, and these designs, once again by Dark and Windy, clearly illustrate that. I especially love the idea of an Armadillo starter that this ground type brings to the table, which is something you wouldn't necessarily expect to see as the basis of a starter Pokemon, and the Poison type shows how a frog, which has been done before with Bulbasaur, could also be done again in new and exciting ways, and again, shows the limitless potential that the idea of starters with new types has. The closest we have ever gotten to starters with types other than grass, fire, and water reportedly came in Generation 4, when Game Freak supposedly toyed with the idea of having starters with the Psychic, Dark, and Fighting types. Aside from Dark being immune to Psychic, this is actually another really good trio, not only in terms of type effectiveness, but the type of starters it could provide as well. We've already seen the hypothetical Fighting type starter, but the Dark type hypothetical starter by Dark and Windy and the Psychic type hypothetical starter by Smiley Fakemon both look great as well, and really help to make the potential that this trio has feel just a little bit more real. And if Psychic, Dark, and Fighting starters did actually look anything like this, I would be pretty happy about it. And lastly, our final trio of the video covers the final non-starter type we have yet to cover in this video, Electric. The trio that works the best with Electric is Electric, Water, and Ground, and it's pretty similar to the last trio in that it works pretty good, other than Ground being immune to Electric entirely. With that said though, the Pokemon themselves can still knock it out of the park with a trio like this, and the Electric type design in particular for this group, designed by Adriano Davino on Instagram, shows exactly why that is the case. In fact, of all the other types, Electric is one that would most likely see it becoming the type of an official starter, honestly, since Pikachu has kind of been a pseudo-starter before over the years. So who knows, maybe one day we will see this happen for real. So there you have it. There's a little hypothetical glimpse into what it could be like if there was a starter Pokemon of every type. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, subscribe, and check out all of the wonderful artists of these designs with the link in the description. You can also support this channel further if you'd like by listening to my Pokemon remixes on Spotify, as well as other streaming services, and by watching my Pokemon Cardinal series here on YouTube. With that said, I'll be back soon with another video, and until then, as always, I love you all, and I will smell you guys later.